Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. Earlier this year, we looked at the tale of Jekyll and Hyde with a pointy-eared twist. But not content with reimagining one iconic hero in Victorian style, the same creative team have another yarn, this time about a certain Kryptonian. I'm taking issue with the Superman monster, and this time we don't mean one directed by Zack Snyder. Let's see if this comic makes us want to turn the page, or turn our heads. The cover is really good, a striking image of what looks like Kal-El, raggedy wrappings over what looks like a blue variant of the solar suit he wore when he came back to life, which kind of feels fitting, all things considered. A pair of electrodes are aimed at him on either side of a monster movie-style title. I was never big on the old Universal monster movies, or most older movies in general, but I both appreciate and respect that little reference. As mentioned before, writers Andy Lanning and Dan Abnett are back, with artists Anthony Williams, Tom Palmer, and Lee Loughridge. We begin where we left off in Batman Two Faces, in the Iceberg Lounge where James Gordon has finished his tale and is waiting for his drinking buddy Peregrine White to tell his own. Despite warnings that it'll be intense and not for the faint-hearted, the head of the Gotham Constabulary doubts it'll shock him. "It's a raw matter of chilling tragedy, of crimes against Mother Nature herself. The story I tell is the creation of pistachio-flavored Oreos." White begins, about 5 summers back in Ingolstadt, a village near the Alpine peaks in Switzerland, were found some of the finest minds with a celebrated university. But one man is at the center of the story, a student of natural philosophy whose scientific success was hampered by his arrogance and reckless ambition. Victor Luthor. I mean, it's not alliterative, but Vic Luthor sounds pretty cool, I gotta say. He's late to meet with a tribunal, led by Professor Hamilton, about the matter of recent experiments he's conducted. In so many words, it seems Victor has appropriated human body parts to study the intricacies of life so they can find the key to immortality, likening himself to the mythical Prometheus bringing light to a world in darkness. The tribunal considers this blasphemy, as men haven't the right to try playing God, but they are sensitive to the young man's past, having lost his parents when he was a child. "We feel this may explain your unhealthy drive to conquer death." "That's ridiculous! Why would I be upset over my parents' death when I'm the one that killed them?" "Aw, nuts. Don't say the quiet part out loud. Don't say the quiet part out loud!" Regardless, they decide to pull his funding, and when he angrily objects to their turning away potentially miraculous discoveries, they threaten to report his sacrilegious pursuits to the church and the justice of the peace, which could lead to prison, being committed to the madhouse, or outright execution. "That's right, Vic, you scatter those papers, that'll show them." He renounces the 3 men for their lack of faith and committal to old beliefs, then leaves saying he prays future generations forgive their short-sightedness. Would he still be saying this if he knew what Twitter can be like? He spends several days in his lab, troubled by the interference he's facing, and eventually visited by his concerned fiancée, Eloise Edge. Despite him saying he'd abandon his life's work for her in an instant, his seclusion makes her worried that he loves studying more than her, and just when she'd gotten her obstinate father more accustomed to the idea of the two being wed. Upon hearing this, Vic says they should talk to her dad about it at their betrothal dance, which she'll organize since he's so incapable with social gatherings. She's much happier now, leaving to take care of things, and her future husband smiles, saying he's happy too. Happy to talk to her father about their arrangements. And the dowry. In case you're not inclined towards the lingo in this context, he's talking about the money, estate, and other goods a wife brings to her husband upon marriage. Now you know why he's smiling like that. Because regardless of the era, Luthor's got a Luthor. We go to the soiree, the biggest of the social calendar, since Eloise's dad is the Burgermeister, meaning a chief magistrate for the town, and is held at his mansion. After some dancing, Victor approaches him about the mechanics of the nuptial arrangement. "I know I'm supposed to change the oil every 3,000 miles, but is that just wedded miles, or does the engagement count?" Like a chump, he suggests they start with the dowry, and Papa Edge ain't no fool. He's had his lawyers draw up a betrothal contract so he'll never gain access to his daughter's money. This is probably why he'd softened on the marriage, but it might be nice if he had more in mind to prevent the thing altogether. But hey, maybe he knows he can't change Eloise's mind. Vic storms out without a word, wandering the forest near the mansion, still yearning to see his work through, but blocked at every turn. That's when he sees a fireball crash nearby. And now it's a party! Okay, get the next pile of oil-soaked rags ready, and light it after we put it on the trebuchet this time, okay? He fearlessly runs through the woods, craving answers to questions racing through his mind, when he finally comes across a metallic object in the crater. There were many shiny green minerals around too, which he figured were transmuted by the heat of impact. As he got closer to the object, the metal bulb melted open, and inside was a child-sized humanoid skeleton resting among several wires. Yeah, that's not horrifying or depressing at all. I'm just gonna go vomit cry for a few minutes over a completely unrelated topic. Suddenly, from a bloomin' onion, because I guess the ship stopped at Outback Steakhouse, a hologram of Jor-El appears, speaking to his son. I guess somehow this version of the Kryptonian AI isn't advanced enough to realize he's, well, you saw. Still, it goes on about their dying planet and his hope that another world would take him in. Meanwhile, the telelingual holostat will act as teacher to Kryptonian science, guiding and healing him, acting as his salvation. After hearing this, Luthor figures his prayers have been answered.
Dad, I think this might be the work of Satan.
He later rented a manse, basically a landowner's mansion, hung up the rocket by chain after carrying it by pony cart, and his days and nights blurred together, spent months studying Jor-El's instructions. But still he was not satisfied. Something was missing. None of this was adding up. Why do kids love Cinnamon Toast Crunch? There's a knock at his door. A creepy-looking dude that refers to himself as a Resurrection Man. I don't know if he's supposed to be another DC character, but he's basically a grave robber, delivering the dead bodies upon request and then some. No sooner does he receive his payment does Vic put a pistol to his head, saying rumor has it he's an informant, and then fires to keep his secrets. Now you make sure not to tell anyone what I'm doing or I'll use this again, understand? Grave-robbing Dave? Why aren't you answering? And what's that red stuff leaking from your head? Don't tell me, I'm a scientist, I'll figure it out. Following Hollow Jor-El's directions, because I guess this was a common thing on Krypton, he stitched together different body parts into one, and placed it all into a revival matrix, which looks like a glass case filled with green liquid, kind of a dramatic name for a see-through bathtub. Next, he aligned some custom-built lightning conductors to draw electricity from a storm that had been brewing nearby for days, attached leads to a conductive breastplate and a strange crest found inside the rocket, and threw the switch. Power flowed through the machine, causing the liquid to begin bubbling. You know, I always wondered how they made Ecto cooler. The tub literally blows up in his face, but he only suffers a scratch despite all that glass. Nevertheless, he's pretty thrilled, having finally learned the secrets of God, as on a splash page, his creation stands up. It lives!
It's alive! Alive! I've always wanted to say that.
But then he got a good look at his creation and got good and scared. It shuffled forward. The candlelight revealed for the first time the corpse-like pallor of the human parody he had created. Well, on the plus side, his monster is protected under fair use. It calls him father, and a frightened Luthor stumbles back, fearful for both his life and reputation if people found out his resurrection procedure made something so ugly. Sure, you sewed some corpses together and brought them to life, but if it don't look man-pretty like a GQ model, what's even the point? In his terror, Vic knocked over some chemicals, causing a fire that quickly spread throughout the lab and causing a few explosions. He gets trapped under some falling debris, but his creation, unharmed by the flames, frees him like all that lumber was nothing. It put the flames out by sweeping its arms like a windmill, then flew Luthor outside through the roof, making it apparent the monstrous Superman wanted to protect him. But, as if nature was backhanding him for what he'd made, they're struck by lightning and sent to Earth. With Luthor unconscious, the creature shambled off. Must get office job. Check toner. Refill coffee pot with decaf. Give undeserved pity chuckle to coworkers that start every Monday asking if it's Friday yet. By dawn, the mad natural philosopher had waken up and hurried into town, warning of a creature on the loose and offering a reward for its death, so as to keep his involvement secret. However, the creature happened to be in town, drawn by the activity of its people, and apparently stopping to get himself a snazzy jacket. Good thing he passed by that 19th century Sears as they were throwing out their unsold overcoats. The creature was hungry, afraid, and thanks to his enhanced senses, keenly aware of the sounds throughout Ingolstadt, including a runaway carriage with frightened passengers inside. With super speed and abandoning his coat, the undead human casserole emulates Action Comics #1, lifting the carriage, now freed from the runaway equines. The wagon is set down, and Eloise steps out. Rather than frightened, she's thankful to be alive and curious how her rescuer managed such a feat. Of course, just as she's telling him not to be afraid, someone in a nearby crowd says they need to kill the monster before they're all slaughtered. If he's going to kill us, why'd it rescue that woman? Look at it! It's ugly! It could only want to kill her itself! But that doesn't make any sense. Look, Bill, do you want to be part of an angry mob? Yeah? Then stop trying to inject logic and rational thinking into the situation and grab a freaking pitchfork! They start throwing rocks and produce, which probably don't hurt him, nor does he really understand Eloise telling him to go, but clearly he can still read the room, so starts running away. But when he's tracked to a dead end, he flies off, leaving the mob awestruck. He heads into the woods outside town, before arriving at the farm of, I'm going to pronounce it, Johann and Marta Kant, an older farm couple still mourning their son, who died in a foreign war. The war on Christmas, oddly enough. Even though he had said Merry Christmas to like 24 people, he said Happy Holidays to one Jewish guy, and then Sean Hannity shot him in the face. Without their notice, the creature caught some Z's in their barn, until one morning he hears a cry for help. His X-ray vision kicks in, seeing Johann at the mercy of a hungry bear looking for food. Before the beast can cause any harm, the so-called monster rushes in, and throws the bear far into the woods, likely to its death, and reminding me of a clip of some cheesy movie where a bear was thrown off a cliff or something. Can't remember what it was from, though. I think Conan O'Brien used it a lot. Anyway, the farmer thinks he's an angel, an answer to his prayers, and they repaid him with a place to stay, hot food, and as best an education they could provide. In turn, he helped with the heavier chores and listened to whatever they said, from idle chatter to simple kindness. They named him after their lost son, Klaus, and over the months he stayed with them, became healthier, old wounds from his creation healing, and looking a lot more Kal-El than Bizarro. One day, as he and his new dad are plowing the fields, they come upon a large stone that rolled in from the slopes, which was apparently common. Klaus easily lifts it and tosses it behind them as they continue their walk. Now it's a problem for some other farm or defenseless woodland creature. Seriously, he could have been more precise with that thing, especially since a passerby just happened to witness it. Sometime later, Klaus is telling his folks that he's decided to confront the man who created him, get answers to his identity and heritage, then return home. Marta is worried he won't like what he discovers, but before he can respond, they're fired upon. The tinker that saw the earlier feat of strength told Luthor, wanting the reward, and in turn, Victor gathered a mob outside the Kant farm. For the Luthor, the timing was perfect. It was, by then, the night of his wedding to Eloise Edge. So rather than do what most married couples do on their wedding night, he decided to go monster hunting. Well, better than the young woman having to do the deed with a guy that doesn't care about her. But it seems like a while since their betrothal dance, given he spent months in his lab leading up to Klaus's creation, and then it was several more months at the farm. Maybe not a full year, but at least half a one. But hey, I'm not versed in 1800s Swiss engagement norms. Also, Vic just so happened to top his cane with a shard of the green crystal from the crash site. I'm sure that won't be important later. The gold-hungry villagers start setting fire to the house, and Johann storms out with a pickaxe, telling them to leave, described by Peregrine's narration as a father protecting his wife and child. Sadly, he suffers a heart attack and falls over. Klaus rushes to his father's side, cursing what Luthor and his mob have done. Well, well, so you can speak now. You know, for all his misdeeds, David Kane at least got misty-eyed when his kid learned to talk. Advancing on him, Victor waves his cane, and of course the rock has an adverse effect on our stitched-together farmhand. By chance, he's found a vulnerability to his creation, that which shared his origin. Just then, Marta screams from inside the cottage, and Klaus rushes in to save her. As the home burns down, Luthor tells his goons to stay and watch for any survivors, since he apparently hasn't even gone through with the wedding yet. He arrives just in the nick of time at his mansion, awaited by his bride-to-be, various guests, and best man, James Olafsson. He's not descended from that goofy snowman from the Frozen movies, is he? Though, if he was, it probably wouldn't be the weirdest thing that's ever happened to Jimmy. But, like with many weddings, there's a crasher, literally, as Klaus flies in through the window, furious and back in his black suit. He advances on Luthor, telling Eloise to stand aside so he can face the murderer, and calling her Lady, which seems awful informal compared to his earlier dialogue. You'd think he'd go with ma'am or miss or something. Maybe there's a regional context I'm lacking. Young Mr. Olafsson steps in. "No, sir, I beg you, not here! Please, disfigured stranger that literally flew through the window. I'm not objecting you calling the groom a murderer, but please, don't take your revenge here. At least wait until we cut the cake." Luthor empties a six-shooter he'd had on him. Weird that James seems surprised the guy is defending himself, but maybe it's a shock at him having a gun in church. The bullets just bounce off Klaus, but sadly ricochet to injure Morgan Edge and kill Eloise. Klaus eyes his creator again, but Victor still has his cane, savagely beating the farm boy with it. We jump to all the guests leaving, not that they needed much incentive, but James sticking around to keep an eye on his buddy. After finding the previously grieving father smothered to death, he realizes things are getting crazy, so went to the basement lab. There, he sees Luthor, having wrapped up Eloise's body and suspended it over the revival matrix, and it appears Vic managed to salvage other machinery from the fire earlier in the story. Rather than explain himself, Vic just shoots James and dumps him in a trap door. When he lands, possibly in a sub-basement, Olaf spots Klaus in the corner. Figuring he's as good as dead, but someone has to stop Luthor, Jimmy crawls over and pleads the stranger to help, then notices a necklace of green stones adorning his neck. What's he done? He went to Evil Jared's! Eloise emerges from the bath, much less dramatically than Klaus had, and pulls off some of her rather form-fitting wrappings, enough to show she's as disfigured as her predecessor. She's been brought back, but feels she's been made a monster, just as her face resembles her healthier appearance in the next panel. For some reason, maybe to demonstrate her uncertain feelings about herself? I can only guess because necklace-free Super Klaus busts in, and things proceed rather oddly. At first eager to confront Luthor, he sees that Eloise has been revived, and since she doesn't exactly know what she is, she asks him for advice. He tells her the pain will subside in time, and she instantly trusts him. Victor decides now's a good time to attack, but Klaus just knocks him into one of his machines. For such an event as this, where she was at least clinically dead for a while, then came back changed, there's no time for this identity crisis to really breathe. Any deserving drama or feelings this personal trial of hers could evoke is over as quickly as her first meeting with the creature. As a fire erupts, presumably from whatever Luthor crashed into, Eloise lets Klaus save her again. They make out as he flies them out of the burning mansion into the night sky, as we briefly return to the Iceberg Lounge. And an incredulous Gordon. White thinks the tale of a puzzle zombie reanimated with alien technology is just as plausible as a rich chemist morphing from a bat-costume strongman into a clown-like serial killer. Naturally. Perhaps if I supply you with the tale's provenance and its epilogue. This better not be the first of 3 mid-credits scenes. I swear the sequel baiting is getting really out of hand. Peregrine was on a ship, saying the details of his destination don't matter. Yeah, that doesn't sound suspicious. When they got stuck in some ice, some of the crew trying to free it with picks saw someone in the distance, a man that seemed delusional. It was Victor Luthor. White watched over him, trying to discern the source of his condition, and read a journal he had on him, which detailed his story and the subsequent search for his creations. Entries ended with the claims of a fortress of solitude deep within the icy terrain where the two outcasts could live together. Luthor soon died of exposure, and while the body was placed on deck, Peregrine was visited by Klaus, looking much healthier now, and his suit glistening. I guess he made himself a new one? Also, given the outline of his bubble, I guess he still sounds the same, more or less. He only spoke to say he'd come for his creator, took the body, melted the ice with his superhuman eyes, and vanished into the night. And they say if you listen closely in our starlit night, you can hear him say, "Subscribe to the Daily Planet. It's a quality periodical." The comic ends with both men unsure if the Superman and his best gal are still out there somewhere. With Gordon unable to one-up that tale, the two men bid each other farewell and take off in separate carriages, until the next of their infrequent nights of story swapping. Too bad that Steve Trevor fellow fell ill. He would have regaled them with his yarn about a wondrous woman he met in the Amazon. That was the Superman monster, and it's pretty good. Little iffy on the last few pages, though. Just how quickly they established the Clark-Lois relationship feels like it detracts from the moment that the latter is understandably confused as to her state of being. I guess because he saved her from the spastic carriage maybe ceded her trust, but it still feels a little too quick to me. Almost like they got the story mostly done before remembering that convention dictated they had to throw in their standard romance. Don't get me wrong, I like them together just fine, but if you're going to build them as a couple, it just works better if it's, built. However, the rest of the story feels very solid. Kind of a downer to have a baby skeleton in there, not to mention the deaths of the Cants, but I get the feeling it was sort of intentional. Maybe it was common in the era which Frankenstein's monster was first written, children dying very young and so forth. I'm guessing, of course. I never read it. I'm mostly familiar with parodies, but I get the feeling the creators know it very well to do a faithful iteration. Or maybe someone that's read and studied Mary Shelley's work will say differently. Though from what little I do understand of it, not only was the monster actually well spoken, like our boy Klaus, it was fitting, if obvious, for the Cants to take the place of the blind farmer, showing that with a little humanity and compassion, the same values that shaped Superman, an outcast can be just as kind and helpful as anyone else, no matter how they appear. Though it's downright misleading that the back cover describes the lab-created Superman as a threat to all around him, when that couldn't be further from the truth. The worst he did was kill a hungry bear that was about to maul an innocent farmer. While I don't know if Dr. Frankenstein was the type to marry just for money, his drive to see his experiments bear fruit is right up there with Luthor's general feeling of human supremacy that he's been characterized with for several years. It's very appropriate that he thinks he can conquer anything, even death, with his mind and the right equipment, even if it did come from outer space. Though, speaking of, why did Eloise return all disfigured? If the gut shot was truly fatal, then she couldn't have been dead for more than an hour or two before being revived. It seemed to make more sense that Klaus appeared that way, since he was a combination of several different corpses. Is it just how a Kryptonian-based machine built by a 19th century scientist would revive anyone? Though she probably got better, given how Klaus looked at the end. But it is unclear how he even has powers. Nothing was ever mentioned about taking DNA from the remains of the ship, so did Jor-El's lessons include some formula for granting superpowers? Does that mean Eloise has them too? In any case, this is a good story that meshes classic literature near seamlessly with Superman mythos, possibly better than its Bat-based predecessor. The art is great, and it's a solid read all around, so I can say, give it a shot. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues. Ah, son of a